March 1984, Toulouse, France. Roger Betaille stands in front of the Airbus board with a proposal that could bankrupt his company. He wants to put computers between pilots and aircraft controls. He wants to replace control yokes with joysticks. He wants to trust software written in the 1980s to prevent pilots from crashing. The entire aviation industry thinks it's suicide. Boeing has a 20-year head start with the 737, over 1,500 delivered, proven, reliable, mechanical. And here's Airbus, the European upstart that's never made money, proposing to bet $2 billion, their entire future, on technology that's never flown a passenger jet. One aircraft, the A320. If it works, they change aviation forever. If it fails, Airbus disappears. Betaille would later call it the most difficult decision he ever made. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. It almost didn't happen. The technology nearly killed people on live television. Conspiracy theories persist to this day about what really happened. And the man who convinced everyone to take this insane risk, he did it in 30 minutes, over lunch. This is the story of how one engineer's obsession with fighter jet technology, one company's desperate gamble, and one catastrophic demonstration flight that should have destroyed everything instead proved them right. Because the A320 didn't just survive, it became the most delivered airliner in history. Boeing owns the short-haul market. The 737 is printing money, airlines love it, pilots trust it. And Airbus? They're barely surviving with the A300 and A310, wide-body twins that are good aircraft but limited market. Roger Betaille knows the math. You need 30% market share to make money in this business. Airbus has maybe 10%. I was convinced that Airbus would never take off with a single aircraft, Betaille said later. Airlines wouldn't commit to a manufacturer that might not exist in 20 years. So Airbus needs a 150-seat single-aisle jet, direct competition with the 737. But here's the trap. The 737 is so good that copying it means guaranteed failure. Betaille, a former rocket engineer, understands this instinctively. I was convinced the 737 was so good there was no way to compete by doing the same thing. They need something revolutionary, something Boeing can't copy, something that makes the A320 fundamentally different. Enter the fighter pilot Bernard Ziegler, test pilot, former French fighter pilot, combat veteran from Algeria, son of Airbus founder Henri Ziegler, and he's just come from Dassault, where he flew the Mirage fighter program. The Mirage used fly-by-wire controls, digital computers interpreting pilot inputs, moving control surfaces electronically instead of through cables and pulleys. In fighters, it's transformative, makes unstable aircraft flyable, enables maneuvers impossible with mechanical controls. Ziegler has been thinking, why not in airliners? Early 1980s, he requests a meeting with Roger Betaille. 30 minutes. Over lunch. 30 minutes later, Airbus commits to putting fly-by-wire in a commercial passenger jet. What they were proposing. Let's be clear about what this meant. In every airliner ever built, when you pull the yoke, cables physically move the control surfaces. Direct, mechanical, fail-safe. If everything electrical dies, you still have some control. Fly-by-wire eliminates all that. Pilot moves a sidestick. Computers read the input. Software calculates what the pilot probably wants, then sends electronic signals to hydraulic actuators. And here's the radical part. The computer can refuse pilot commands. It's called flight envelope protection. The aircraft won't stall, even if you pull back as hard as you can. Won't overstress the airframe, even if you try. The software knows the aircraft's limits and prevents you from exceeding them. To pilots in 1984, this sounds like science fiction. Worse, it sounds like losing control of your aircraft. The stakes nobody talks about. The A320 program cost $2 billion in 1984 money. That's $8 billion today. $10 billion US. Airbus isn't profitable. They're surviving on government subsidies from France, Germany, and the UK, barely. Margaret Thatcher, reviewing the British government's share of the investment, says publicly, "I do not want another Concorde on my hands." The business case, the official projection that secures government funding, assumes they'll sell 600 to 800 aircraft, total, over the life of the programme. If they don't hit those numbers, Airbus collapses. European civil aviation ends. Boeing becomes a monopoly. Bataille later admitted, "Perhaps we were too bold. We had no choice. Either we were going to be first with new technologies, or we could not expect to be in the market." A320 isn't just fly-by-wire, it's a complete reimagining of the cockpit. Sidestick controllers instead of yokes, glass displays instead of analog instruments, 6 computers managing flight controls, Intel 80186 and Motorola 68010 processors, which in 1987 is cutting-edge technology. 2.5 megabytes of memory in the flight management computer. Your phone has 1,000,000 times that. But in 1987, this is extraordinary computing power. The benefits, they're real. Weight savings, no heavy cable systems, cockpit commonality, every Airbus flies the same way, reducing pilot training costs, fuel efficiency, smoother handling, and the killer feature, you can build an entire family, A318, A319, A320, A321, and pilots qualify on all of them with one type rating. Bataille makes another critical decision. The A320's fuselage will be 7 inches wider than the 700 seatbones. 7 inches doesn't sound like much, but in a 6-across cabin, that's an extra inch per passenger, plus 1 more inch in the aisle. Jürgen Weber, Lufthansa chairman, later says, "Customer acceptance of the A320 fuselage is better than the 737. It is pure physics, very simple, and the customer feels it. It costs weight, a couple hundred kilograms, but Bataille knows passengers vote with their wallets. Comfort matters. Behind the scenes, the A320 nearly dies before it flies. French President François Mitterrand wants the A320, single aisle to compete with Boeing. German Chancellor Helmut Kohl wants the A330, A340, long-range wide-bodies where Airbus doesn't compete. The argument escalates to diplomatic crisis. Both leaders, unaware they're using the same intermediary, independently ask Bavarian politician Franz Josef Strauss to mediate. Strauss ends up drafting letters between them, negotiating with himself. Eventually, they compromise. Build the A320 first. It's cheaper, faster to market, less risky for testing radical technology on a smaller aircraft. Bataille's reasoning: if you're making a significant technical step forward like fly-by-wire, it's easier and less risky to enter service with a smaller, short-range aircraft that makes many more flights. The first A320 takes off with Bernard Ziegler in the test pilot seat. He's not just testing the aircraft, he's testing his own vision. If fly-by-wire fails here, his career ends. The flight lasts 3 hours, 23 minutes. Pierre Beau, Airbus's chief test pilot, later reports no problems with the control system's 7 computers. Over the next year, the test program racks up 1,200 hours across 530 flights. Every test pushes the envelope protection harder. Intentional stalls, high angle of attack approaches, emergency scenarios. The computer never falters. European Joint Aviation Authorities grant certification February 26, 1988. The first A320 delivers to Air France on March 28th. Commercial service begins April 8th, Paris to Berlin via Düsseldorf. At launch, Airbus has 80 orders. Air France, British Caledonian, and a handful of others willing to bet on unproven technology. Boeing executives watch with skepticism. One Boeing VP, commenting on Airbus's government subsidies, says, "Europe builds beautiful trains. I challenge the concept that everyone has to build everything." 3 days earlier, Air France took delivery of its third A320, FGFKC, fresh from the factory. chosen for a demonstration flight, low-altitude flyby to show off the aircraft's capabilities. Captain Michel Asselineau, 44 years old, 10,463 flight hours, head of Air France's A320 training division, heavily involved in test flying the A320. He has total confidence in the aircraft's computer systems. The plan: fly over the runway at 100 feet with gear down, slow speed, maximum angle of attack. Show the crowd that the A320's envelope protection makes stalls impossible. 130 passengers on board, mostly press and contest winners who'd never flown before. First passenger flight of the A320. At 14:45, the A320 approaches the runway, descends through 100 feet, through 50 feet, down to 30 feet, lower than planned but spectacular for the crowd. Asselineau pulls up to clear the forest at the end of the runway. The elevators don't respond. Alpha Protection, the stall prevention system, interprets his pull as a stall risk and limits elevator authority. 5 seconds later, the aircraft hits treetops. Engines ingest leaves and branches. Combustion chambers clog. The A320 crashes into the forest and erupts in flames. 136 people on board, 133 survived the initial impact. But 3 can't escape. A disabled 14-year-old boy, a 7-year-old girl trapped by a collapsed seatback, and a woman who went back to help her. They die of smoke inhalation. The investigation concludes pilot error. Asselineau flew too low, too slow, with engines at idle. Initiated go-around too late. Asselineau disputes everything. Claims he applied full throttle, but the engines didn't respond. Claims the flight data recorder was tampered with, 4 seconds missing. Claims the fly-by-wire computer prevented him from pulling up. The aircraft's black box data supports some of his claims. When he pulled the sidestick back, the elevator moved down. The computer may have triggered an automatic response, confusing the low altitude and slow speed for a landing attempt. Or the computer correctly prevented a stall that would have killed everyone. Christian Roger, French Air Force aerobatics team leader and professional pilot, joins the defense, exposes multiple anomalies in the investigation. Asselineau is convicted, 10 months in prison, loses his career. To this day, aviation forums debate: did the pilot make catastrophic errors, or did the computer? June 1988. The A320's first passenger flight ends in fire, death, conspiracy theories, and global headlines. Any other program would be dead. Airbus does something remarkable. They don't make excuses. They publish every detail, retrain pilots aggressively, emphasize understanding the automated systems, make clear that fly-by-wire requires different thinking. The computer is your partner, not your servant. Northwest Airlines Operations Director Clay Foushee sums it up in 1993. On a gusty day at Washington National, you can see an A320 fly and then watch anything else. Even with the unaided eyeball, you can see the difference in stability. It will do everything for you very well, but if you just sit there and let it fly itself, something awful will happen. The solution: train pilots to use automation actively. Understand what the computer is doing. Maintain situational awareness. Respect the envelope protection, but know when you're testing its limits. After 1994, there are no more A320 accidents attributed to fly-by-wire confusion. Boeing's response, Boeing watches and learns. When they designed the 777 in the early 1990s, they adopt fly-by-wire. But with a critical difference: the pilot can override everything. No envelope protection. Yokes that move as if connected to cables, even though they're electronic. Bernard Ziegler scoffs, like putting a steering wheel on a horse. But Boeing's philosophy is different. They trust pilots to make final decisions, even bad ones. Airbus trusts the computer to prevent bad decisions. Both approaches work. Both philosophies are valid. The debate continues in aviation circles to this day. The numbers that changed everything, remember the business case? 600 to 800 aircraft. By 2025, the A320 family has delivered over 12,260 aircraft, 15 times the projection. October 2025, the A320 family officially surpasses the Boeing 737 as the most delivered commercial aircraft in history. The aircraft Margaret Thatcher nearly killed becomes one of the most successful government investments in European history. Every modern Airbus, A220, A330, A350 uses the same fly-by-wire architecture, same cockpit philosophy. Pilots can transition between them with minimal training. Boeing eventually adopts fly-by-wire across its fleet. Embraer uses it, Bombardier, Comac C919, the Irkut MC-21. Bernard Ziegler retired in 1997 as Airbus's Senior Vice President of Engineering. Died in May 2021 at 88. Roger Bataille died in June 2019 at 97. The A350 final assembly line in Toulouse is named in his honour. Their gamble, the crazy idea that computers could fly airliners better than cables and pulleys, became the foundation of modern aviation. Today, an A320 family aircraft takes off or lands somewhere in the world every 2.5 seconds. Low-cost carriers like Ryanair, EasyJet, Indigo and AirAsia built entire business models around the A320's efficiency and commonality. The wider cabin Bataille insisted on? Passengers notice, airlines notice. That 7 inches changed the competitive landscape. The Habsheim crash could have killed the program. Instead, it forced Airbus to perfect the pilot training, to make clear what the technology could and couldn't do, to build trust through transparency. And in an industry where crashes typically doom aircraft programs, the A320 went on to become the safest, most reliable single-aisle jet ever built. Was Michel Assouline right? Did the computer fail? Or did he push the aircraft beyond reasonable limits and the computer tried to save him? We'll never know with certainty. The conspiracy theories persist, but here's what we know for sure. In the 37 years since Habsheim, fly-by-wire has prevented countless accidents. Envelope protection has saved lives. The technology Assouline blamed works consistently on hundreds of thousands of flights. Modern relevance Boeing's 737 MAX faces ongoing quality issues, production caps, and public skepticism. Airbus dominates market share, 60% of single-aisle orders. The company Roger Bataille built to challenge Boeing's monopoly now is the market leader. And it happened because one engineer convinced another, over lunch, to bet everything on computers.